First up we have Brittany. So yeah, this one's improved quite a lot. Um, I think everything's lit and you can see everything, which is great as far as the rendering is concerned. I like the two different spotlights following him, which that looks really good. Um, and just makes for an interesting dynamic thing, and it keeps our attention on the character, so that's all good. Um, yeah, he's well lit, easy to see. For me, the animation seems to be going fast, so I might say kind of lengthen the whole thing by, I don't know, a third or 50% or something like that, because it just seems really, really fast. The way he's going through that, and maybe that's accurate for the speed of skating, but it just looks fast. Um, but and then the other thing, animation-wise, is the stop. So I think that it seems very abrupt, and I think it should kind of slow down to a stop at least a little bit more at the end, and then maybe have a little bit of follow through where the body just kind of freezes in that end pose, and rather than freezing in the end pose, if it could, you see the a slight after the feet come to a full stop, if you see the body kind of tilt forward a little bit, maybe the hands and arms kind of move forward and then settle back. It can be, subtle, but I think there should be that kind of, leaning forward after the stop and then settling back into the final pose. I think that would help with that. So even if it is a fairly sudden stop, if you have that follow through and kind of recoil, it'll be more believable. And I'm guessing this is hardware render. Oh, I like. I'm noticing now you even have the texture on the ice of all the marks from skating, which is really good. I think that if this is hardware render, you should know that you can turn on anti-aliasing, which can clean up the image a bit. Um, and but yeah, it's very good. Good work. And here's the rendered still. I think these lights are going to look nice, though I would say you'll want to put in the light source and put some incandescence and glow on those. I mean, unless the idea is that they're coming from above. But when I remember from your reference image, it was that you could see the light source in the shot. So I would say that if you're going to have those, you'll want the light source and turn up the incandescent and glow on those. And then I just try to match your reference as best you can. And I guess it would have been nice to see this from the point of view of the the actual cameras you'll be rendering. This looks like solid white, and maybe find a way to tone that down. I'm not sure why that's so white. And then this has gotten very hot in the center here, so you might want to reduce your intensity of your spotlights a little bit so that it doesn't get 100% white. Just you can be just short of that, which would be a little better, and then you get a little bit more detail, because there's really no detail from about the center of the spot to maybe there, and it's nicer if you can see some detail. It'll just be a solid white circle. But yeah, looks good. Brittany also had a question about her blend shapes, and for all of you, if you see your character sort of flies off the skeleton when you use your blend shape slider, that is an input order issue. As I mentioned here, it's gone over in module 11 page 2, so take a look at that. You just need to select the surface, go to all inputs, which again you can see in that module, and then middle mouse drag the blend shape so it's below the skin cluster. So take a look at that, and yeah, that's the problem that she was having with that. Next up is Damian. So this is looking really good. Can see a lot of improvements here. Um, Yeah, you really toned down the lighting there. I can see that's great. The animation's improved. I would just look out for your holds. You know, it's always good to have holds, but you need these sort of moving holds. So, like, great that she pauses here, but we've got, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or 7 or 8 frames where totally frozen, and you need to put in a breath or a weight shift or something. She can't be totally frozen during the hold. There has to be some movement. I can see that you've figured out a way to animate moving the bed down when she presses her claw into that, which is great. But it would be good if you can figure out, how to adjust the timing of it so it stays down until she removes it. I really like this little spin here. I don't know if that was intentional or not, but it's great. It just feels like this fluid, like someone who is very comfortable using the claw would do something like that as they move. So that seemed great. Even this little touch here where for just a moment she rests her hand on that, that's nice. And this toss, that's really working now. I think that the walk is definitely better with the longer strides. It looks like you're overextending. See how it's sort of like straightening the leg completely and kind of pulling it beyond that. A few things you'll want to do to improve that. One is to lower the root. Another is you can rotate the hips back and down, and you can also use the foot roll, and we can take a look at Maya for those things. So that's probably going to be true for all of the steps, so you should take a look at that. This is looking really good, except for that there's a little sort of extra bounce, maybe a couple. So just change this to frame number. It's that first bounce is unnecessary, so it goes up and then down, and then there's that right there, right around 501, 502. If you can get rid of that, this second one, this sort of bigger, heftier one works, but it's that first little bounce that kind of throws things off. And then there's some little kind of jerkiness in the movement of that. I don't know. You'll want to look at that because that gives it less weight. I'm not sure what that is. But yeah, we could probably take a look for that in the Maya file as well. Before we do that, let's look at the stills. Hallway lighting looks good. Clear sense of light sources, like perhaps there's, spotlights in the ceiling or something. That's working. And yeah, I like that you've gone much more subtle with the light from the screen. You might want to put some incandescent color on here. And just in general, for all of your gray surfaces, if you don't have time to texture them, at least put a color on them. And doesn't, don't do some big, heavy, saturated color, but, stay fairly muted with it, but just some kind of color, just so it doesn't look solid gray. And this is good, except I think I was going to say for this one, there's a really nice clear sense of light source coming from there, and clearly this lamp is a light source as well. I think this is okay, except she's getting really hot here, very bright, so I would tone down the intensity of the light there, decrease that somewhat. Okay. So I'm in the Maya file and taking a look at the walk, and let's just focus on one step to see the various things we can do for a step. Maybe I'll do this foot that's closer to the camera. So first of all, it looks like you've kind of manually done the foot roll with a rotate X, or how have we? Not really sure what's happening there. Oh, there is rotate X on that guy. I think that's where the rotation is. So I'm going to take that out. I'm going to delete that and zero that out. And so when The foot lands. Also, let's just get rid of any roll keyframes that are currently here. Okay, so in the foot lands, we'll use foot roll and we'll tilt it back up like so and key that. And maybe just a couple frames afterwards, 2 to 3 frames afterwards, that'll go to 0. So lands on its heel and flattens out. And then, oh, what's pulling that up now? Is that this guy? Okay, let's zero that out. Get rid of that. Yeah, because I'm just going to use the foot roll for this because it doesn't just do the heel and toe, it does the ball of the foot as well, and that's where it's better than using just those things. Okay, so it landed on the heel, flattened out. Before the body starts pulling this away, I'll start rolling forward. So I'll key, not roll angle, just roll. Make sure that's keyed there, and maybe by here, I'm just middle mouse dragging. See that? See how it goes ball and toe? It's actually kind of subtle. You can see that ball one working a little bit, unless you already have some animation on that as well, which I don't think you do. Let me just turn off surfaces there. No, there's no animation there. Okay, so yeah, so all in that one control: heel, flat, ball, and then toe. Although maybe I did it a little early, I'm not sure. But anyways, you get the idea for that. And then the other thing to be aware of is, the up and down movement. So I keep doing that, right? So the legs, are passing each other at around, say, 310, and at 299 they're about fully spread. So 299 should be the lowest point, 310 should be the highest. Let's take a look and look at the Y translate and spreading it out a little bit. So 299 is low and 310 is high. So you are doing it, which is great. I guess I would just say that you can go further. So you get that bend in there. The other ways you can get the bend are, where's my curves? Oh. You can also rotate the hips forward towards the leg that's carrying the weight. Of course, you'll have to then go and correct with the spine on the pose for the rest of the body. But that will help with that as well. And then you don't have to go up and down. And you can also it should be pretty level here, actually. Actually, that's a little exaggerated how much I moved it forward, but you get the idea how that will reduce the amount you need to go up and down to be able to prevent the legs from overextending. So put some hip twist in there, probably not as much as I did. I mean, the other hip twist you can do is on the passing pose. You can, oops, that's the wrong one. You can tilt the hips up towards the leg that's carrying the weight, and again, correct for these guys. So up towards the leg carrying the weight. Oh, and also, by the way, the root should be centered over the foot carrying the weight. So you get a little bit of that side to side. And actually, it's kind of nice. I mean, you can already see that there's something, to me at least, looks a little more natural about that pose than what we had before, which you may or may not notice that much from the side, but you'll notice it a little bit. So anyway, use the foot roll, prevent the leg from overextending through a combination of adjusting the height and the hips rotation to where the hips are kind of rotated towards the leg, meaning like, forward, towards the leg that's forward, so just rotate them like that. and then correct for the spine to straighten out the body. And I think you'll be happier with that walk. Just to look at the end real quick. Oh, where's our... Oh, that's beyond the end, I guess. Okay. Is this parented to anything? The wrench? Just gonna go up. Oh, wow. So what? How is that moving with the arm if it's not parented or constrained? I don't really know how you have it set up. Wow. I just assumed. I think you've made this harder on yourself. So at some point you should have um, the wrench parented to the to one of the hands. And there's a way I can post a video that I've showed. It's kind of a pickup set down object video where you animate the visibility. So you might want to take a look at that. Might be helpful to you. But I think maybe some of the shaking is coming from whatever you're doing to move it, which I can't even tell right now. Reveals selected. Oh, is it? That's the node that's animated. So you've animated it. Well, so it could be, it's just, that animation. Wow. So you've animated this group node to match that stuff by hand. Yeah, the thing to have done was to parent it to whatever you would call the primary hand, which I would say is the right hand. And you can, at the point you want to do that, you sort of swap the visibility from the one that was sitting on the ground to the one that's parented, and I'll post a separate video on how to do that. Next up is Tommy. Okay, so I've talked at length about the animation prior critiques. I think, again, the rig is just not functional for that. I can see that. So, thinking a little bit about light source, I guess. Yeah, so there's a giant spotlight kind of from above pointing. It looks like it's from above pointing down and putting this big circle on the ground with some cast shadows below this. And thinking about outdoors, there wouldn't be just a giant spotlight floating. So if you're representing the sun, you would use a directional light because that's kind of even parallel light, which is how the sun effectively lights the earth. So to have a giant spotlight here is just sort of it doesn't. I think the color and the brightness is good. I just think it needs to be a directional light, and you'll be all right. And then it'll light the whole scene like that, rather than this one area. I do like. It looks like you have some other lighting the interior. I think, which is, if that's the case, that's good. But yeah, for the outdoor, you'll need like a directional light representing the sun rather than a big spotlight. And textures look good, so that's a nice plus. And but the animation needs work. And also, if you're taking this into either After Effects and Premiere and rendering it out, check your render settings because it looks like you've got interlacing turned on. You want to use progressive instead, so make sure interlacing is turned off in your export options, because otherwise you get these lines, these horizontal lines, which you don't want. Next up is Vincent. Okay, so yeah, it's coming along. I do like the light sources under there. You might actually consider adding some small light sources to light up the wine bottles and glasses, and also rather than having just solid gray for your background, adding if you can textures, but at the very least colors, and keep it, you know, muted and simple. You don't add a bunch of bright primary colors. Keep it simple, but just rather than having gray, it'd be better to have at least some color, and then better than that would be textures. Um, so he's crossing into some very sharp spotlight or some kind of, I don't know if it's a cast shadow or what, but it's a little um, just kind of extreme for this indoor lighting. I wouldn't expect such a hard shadow and such a big change between brightness and darkness. So I don't know exactly which light's doing that, but I might consider toning that down. And even on whatever lights this is, it looks like maybe a big spotlight. If you have maybe it's like the penumbra of the spotlight, you could soften that so you don't have these hard lines. I'm guessing these are just point lights underneath. So yeah, that's just that kind of brightness to darkness. And I guess I don't know what's justifying it because it's a very tall ceiling, so it's not like he's passing right under some big, hanging lamp or something, and it creates these kind of hard shadows on his face, which I don't think are necessarily helping you. So I might try to tone that down. And yeah, I mean, just kind of pretty brightly lit. I think it's okay. I mean, one thing that's interesting, you might look at some reference of, is that if you see I'm assuming this is a window here, it's a window. If you see the outdoors through a window, on almost any normal indoor lighting, it's really blown out. It's really overexposed. Outdoor light is just generally much, during the day, it's much brighter than indoor. So, you might consider, going even brighter on these images and kind of washing that out. You wouldn't, a camera wouldn't be able to do this. It wouldn't be able to correctly expose his face and that outdoor lawn. The lawn would be too bright compared to him, since he's not super brightly lit. And what would really help here is some cast shadows. So if you could figure out a light source that is casting a shadow, or at the very least, if you could get ambient occlusion working, that would be much better. Because what it does for you is it just, and the same is true for here, or maybe you do have ambient occlusion on. It's hard to tell. I'm just noticing how it's darker by that edge, which makes me think maybe you do have ambient occlusion. But yeah, some cast shadows just so that it's for the foot contact. It shows the foot contact much better. Kind of puts him in the place that he's in a little bit more. There was a little flash there. Don't know. I don't know what happened. It looks like maybe the lighting was slightly different on one render versus another, so be aware of that. Yeah, it looks like you're almost done rendering. So just those are a few thoughts. I think that it's coming along well. Sort of usable as it is, but I think it could be improved. Okay. Oh, and just one more thing. The assignment was that you just needed to turn in a hardware render of the whole thing. So a hardware render of your complete animation, and then render still shots just of each of your yeah, right here, rendered still of each of your shots. So you didn't have to have the whole thing rendered for today. So this is sufficient for that. Although it would have been good to get a hardware render of the full thing just to watch the animation begin and end, but it's fine. Just so you know. Next up is Sangjong. All right. Well, first I would say I'm very pleased to see that you have replaced the trees. That's a big plus. I think you might want to populate the backdrop a little bit. Where I can see that you added that hillside, and I think that really improves it. I think you just had like a flat plane there before, and that's a big plus. Maybe something in the sky would be a nice addition too. And did you also manage to turn down the specularity on the surface? Yeah, I think you did. So that's also really good. Nice reflection in the eyes. It'd be great to get some eyeball movement as well in that look there. It looks like the head's just moving and the eyes are not. And usually the eyes are kind of locked on whatever is they're tracking. So rather than moving with the head like they did just there, Um, Typically, what would happen in an animation like this? So if the rabbit was going to turn its head this way, first you'd see the eyes go, they dart from one side to the other, and then the eyeballs would stay locked on what they were looking at, and the head would sort of turn to catch up with them. But here you have the eyeballs kind of moving with their head, and it's not generally how things work. The eyes should kind of dart around, and they should be one step ahead of the head rotation, and then stay locked on what they're looking at rather than rotating with the head. But yeah, I mean, it's a simple scene, but it's got a good look overall, and I think at the very, if you could smooth these trees, and that would be better, but at the very least choose soften edges so we're not seeing the faceted corners of these polygons. Um, and it would be amazing as if you could replace these squares with a leaf image that has transparency, and then you would have a tree full of leaves rather than a tree full of squares. So that would be a good idea for you to finish that off, and that would actually those two things would go a long way to plus this background. So, but yeah, I mean overall it's looking pretty good. Okay, next up we've got Cindy. Okay, so yeah, this is looking pretty good. I think that the look kind of matches the cartoony style you're going for. I like that you've kind of got a sky in there and maybe a very small kind of masking issue here on those because it's looks like it's like pre-multiplied with the black on that alpha channel, I think. But I like the sky you've chose with the bright sun source. Although I would say that I would say if you'll notice that the cast shadows from the trees are going in this direction, which means the sun would actually be, over here casting a shadow down that way. So to have the light source visible in the frame, you could kind of fake it and put it on the right side. Frankly, it'd probably be off screen, to the right here to get the shadows to go in that direction. Although then you have another light, it looks like, casting a shadow down in this direction for that tree. So I'm not sure. Maybe something here. Um, so yeah, I mean, for outdoor light, you really just want one big light source that's casting shadows, namely the sun, and then everything else will be fill lights, which do not cast shadows. So it's okay to have other lights in there and fill lights, whatever's, for example, casting this shadow. Just turn off cast shadows for that light so we don't get that shadow there. Um, yeah, I see that you've got a little bit of foot movement there, so that's improved. And a little bit more body movement. I think that the ground is okay. I mean, you kind of, at this distance, it's fine. I think at this distance, it's distracting to have that kind of blurry grass, and yeah, you just might want to try something else. Maybe you want to just for this close-up shot, replace the ground with a smaller patch of ground and put like a higher resolution grass image in there or something. But it's a little distracting. I think it would also might help to desaturate it a little bit because it's very saturated and bright. And it might help to be just a lower saturation might be a little less distracting. And I guess, yeah. So like I mentioned, losing this shadow, so turn off cast shadows for whatever light is casting that shadow. But these shadows are good. They're helping place the characters there. Yeah, okay, that's coming along nicely. You've got that cartoony looking, so it's working for you. So for this one, there's not really anything to look at right now but a Maya file. So what I would say is uh, if you just I wrote it all down here. Just download the Mental Ray plugin so that you can show me a render, because otherwise I'm not sure what to focus on looking at here. So yeah, it would help to. I mean, one of the part of the assignment was just to turn in just a hardware render, submit a hardware render of a complete animation as QuickTime. So you didn't even have to render. That takes minutes. That doesn't take hours. So it would be good to get that in ASAP. See if you can get a Mental Ray installed and working, and then let me know where you're at. And if for some reason you can't get Mental Ray working by the end, at least get a hardware render of the whole thing turned in by the end.